The National Desk, America's News, now.
Apple has maintained monopoly power in the smartphone market not simply by staying ahead of the competition on the merits, but by violating federal antitrust law.
The Department of Justice files a suit against Apple as Congress contemplates action against TikTok, the latest in government versus big tech. It's almost been a year since the Covenant school shooting. Why the shooter's manifesto is now closer to being made public than ever. And then a possible monumental medical breakthrough for patients waiting for a new kidney. Why one successful operation could open new doors for thousands in need. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and thank you for being here with us. Right now, police say 2 suspects wanted for the shooting of 3 Idaho Office of Correction officers at a hospital are in custody. Officials say inmate Skylar Meade and his accomplice Nicholas Umfenfor may have killed 2 people while on the run after the attack and escape yesterday morning. As of this morning, 1 officer is in serious condition. Another is in critical. We will continue to track the latest developments. And here is a live look at Fort Lauderdale, where 3 officers walked into a possible ambush at a Holiday Inn Express this morning. Authorities say a man had called dispatch this morning saying he killed someone at the hotel. When officers arrived to make contact with the caller, they were unable to do so and they entered the room. It was then shots were fired. 1 officer was hit and suffered non-life-threatening injuries. The suspect was later found dead in the room. No other bodies were found in the room, but the investigation into exactly what happened is ongoing. So far this year, according to research by the Gun Violence Archive and the Officer Down Memorial page, at least 76 law enforcement officers have been shot and injured in 2024, and 8 officers have been killed by gunfire in the line of duty. The Justice Department, along with 15 states and the District of Columbia, is suing Apple for allegedly using its power to edge out rivals. They argue Apple prevents smaller companies from accessing the hardware and software in its iPhones, leading to fewer options for customers. The lawsuit also alleges Apple purposefully limits functions of its iPhones to make competitors look inferior, thus driving more users to Apple products. Attorney General Merrick Garland explains how that happens in text.
The conversation is not encrypted, videos are pixelated and grainy, and users cannot edit messages or see typing indicators. As a result, iPhone users perceive rival smartphones as being lower quality because the experience of messaging friends and family who do not own iPhones is worse, even though Apple is the one responsible.
The DOJ says the contract restrictions imposed on app developers creates a situation where new innovations stay within Apple's own system, allowing Apple to make more money from customers and developers. Apple says the restrictions are to protect users' privacy and security. New York Attorney General Letitia James is moving towards seizing Donald Trump's New York properties. This if he is unable to pay the $464 million penalty plus interest in the New York fraud civil case ruling against him. James filed judgment paperwork in Westchester County, where Trump's golf resort is located. Trump has until Monday to secure the bond and prevent the seizure from taking place. Early this morning, Congress unveiled details of the final 6 appropriations bills to keep government running. With a Friday deadline to pass, the bill allocates $1.2 trillion for Homeland Security and the Defense Department, among other agencies. Timing for a vote is unclear. The House could vote on it today, but for it to pass the Senate quickly before the deadline, it will need a unanimous vote, and many Republicans are upset with how this bill is put together.
I think this whole process is broken, we're talking about appropriations bills that have been lying in public for months, over 6-7 months. So we've got to figure out a better way to appropriate.
It's a disaster, but since I've been up here, it's been that way. It always comes down to the last minute. Everything's pushed in, and just it's loaded down with things that it shouldn't be in there.
DMVs across the country are back up and running after a major outage earlier today. Several states reported service disruptions that prevented them from being able to issue driver's license and vehicle titles. A DMV software provider said there was a cloud connectivity problem that lasted from 9:50 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. The issue was largely resolved by 2. The future of TikTok is still up in the air as Senate leadership hasn't decided how or whether to move forward with a bipartisan House-approved bill that would force TikTok to be sold by its Chinese parent company or be banned in the U.S. Some movement is possible soon now that senators have received a classified briefing on the issue. National correspondent Atra El-Nashar reports on how this fits into broader concerns about national security.
Washington's in a race to outcompete China, and some lawmakers say they are long past a wake-up call. Fears are setting in that the U.S. is falling behind, especially when it comes to technology, putting national security in peril.
Where our adversaries use American components in their weapons and their surveillance systems.
Like that infamous Chinese spy balloon last year, which U.S. officials say relied on American technology.
Our current export control system is deeply flawed.
Concerns not unrelated to American semiconductors turning up in Russian weapon systems for its invasion of Ukraine. Partisan disagreements over how to target and implement export controls getting in the way of Congress's ability to close gaps that allow U.S. tech to get into the wrong hands. Meanwhile, an effort to protect Americans' user data from the Chinese Communist Party may be losing momentum. Last week, the House overwhelmingly passed a bill that would force TikTok to be sold from its Chinese parent company ByteDance or be banned in the U.S. Senate leadership appears much more hesitant.
I'm confident of nothing when it comes to the Senate, but I guess I should say I'm cautiously optimistic given the statements of support that many senators, particularly Senators Warner and Rubio, have made.
I absolutely would like to see it expedited. Nobody's talking about a ban. We're talking about transferring the ownership and the algorithm to some other control that's not Chinese.
Warner and other backers of the bill are careful to phrase it that way because they know just how unpopular a TikTok ban would be among young voters in this election year, regardless of how much of a national security threat it may pose. On Capitol Hill, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
California residents have voted yes on a measure requiring counties to spend money to tackle homelessness. Proposition 1 calls for spending on housing and drug treatment programs. Now, it was strongly promoted by Governor Gavin Newsom. In 2004, California voters approved a tax on millionaires for mental health services. Counties now have to spend 2/3 of that money on housing and support programs. Florida is trying a different strategy to address homelessness. Governor Ron DeSantis has signed a bill making it illegal for local governments to tolerate people sleeping in the streets. Once in effect, the bill will require counties to relocate homeless people to special camps and provide them with resources. Homeless people who sleep in public places are subject to arrest. Diversity, equity, and inclusion programs will soon be banned in Alabama public schools. Governor Kay Ivey signed the law restricting local public school boards and universities from participating in what the legislation calls divisive concepts that includes discussions around racism, slavery, gender, and religion. It also requires universities to assign restrooms based on biological gender only. The law goes into effect in October. Manhattan's largest school district has voted in favor of a measure challenging a policy allowing transgender athletes to participate in girls' sports. The measure requests that the city's education department hold a public review of the policy, seeking more input from the community. The school's chancellor has called the resolution despicable. A federal judge has ordered the FBI to turn over the Covenant school shooter's writings to the court to decide if the writings should be made public. Online publications have sued the FBI for blocking the release of the manifesto and believe this is a step towards victory.
The documents are public record and they should be released. Metro government failed to release them. We asked them nicely. They didn't. And they shared those documents with the FBI. We asked them nicely in accordance with the law. They didn't. And so when the government entities don't comply with the law, we have recourse through the courts.
And this ruling comes 1 week before the 1-year anniversary of the shooting at the Covenant School in Nashville, Tennessee. where Audrey Hale, a woman who identifies as transgender, killed 3 students and 3 faculty members at the private Christian school. Coming up next here on the National Desk, a major storm is moving quickly through the north. How much snow some cities could see by tomorrow. Then later on, U.S. life expectancy has changed, what the latest data shows and whether it's trending in the right direction. Plus, hundreds of children have been exposed to lead in their baby food. The action states are now taking to prevent this from happening again. We'll be right back. The northern plains and northeast are gearing up for snow impacting more than 20 million people. The first round is hitting the Dakotas and upper Midwest today before moving into the Great Lakes and the Northeast tomorrow. Some areas could get up to 8 inches by tomorrow and travel issues are expected. A second round of snow is possible from the Cascades to the Rockies, Plains and Midwest. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is back in the Mideast today for his 6th trip since war broke out on October 7th. Today, while in Cairo, he met directly with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and also discussed ongoing peace negotiations with representatives from Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and the Palestinian Authority. Meantime, the U.S. has issued a draft resolution to the UN Security Council for an immediate and sustained ceasefire. Secretary Blinken called the measure an example of the pressure the U.S. is placing on Israel to protect civilians and increase humanitarian aid. The resolution does call for the release of the remaining Israeli hostages. A vote could take place as early as this week. In Gaza, Israel conducted a 3rd day of military operations inside the Al-Shifa hospital complex in Gaza City. Israel says they've killed more than 50 militants just in the past day and arrested hundreds of others, including senior Hamas and Islamic Jihad members. In the raids, Israel says they have gathered Hamas intelligence, including details of Hamas leadership and command and control information of the terrorist organization. The U.S. aided in these raids with electronic eavesdropping, according to sources to NBC. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu could be coming to speak before all of Congress again. House Speaker Mike Johnson says he will extend an invitation after members of his conference encouraged him to do so. Netanyahu addressed Republican senators yesterday in a private discussion, but Majority Leader Chuck Schumer refused a request to allow him to speak with the Democratic senators. The power held by big tech remains under intense scrutiny. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins joins us from Washington, where a new watchdog report raises concerns one of the largest companies is meddling in American politics.
The latest allegations of election interference don't point fingers at Russia or China, but at American-owned Google.
Their algorithms are being tinkered with so that they can advance the left in America.
The conservative watchdog group Media Research Center publishing a special report accusing the tech company of meddling with major U.S. elections 41 times over the past 16 years, tipping the scales in favor of the candidates they prefer.
When 92% of all searches worldwide go through Google, Google has the power to define what is and what isn't truth.
The report details examples back to 2008 when the search engine appeared to give a boost to Barack Obama in the Democratic primary by censoring support for Hillary Clinton. Rick Santorum's 2012 GOP presidential primary run also impacted by Google when they refused to correct a smear campaign.
The fact that we could not fix this Google bomb had a huge impact on me politically.
We spoke with Santorum Thursday.
I think what these companies are doing is a disservice to the country.
Rick Santorum pointing out Google had a lot more power in the early 2000s. Today, politicians have many more avenues to connect with the public. Google's dominance, though, remains a powerful force. In the 2022 election cycle, MRC found the majority of campaign websites for GOP Senate candidates in competitive races didn't make the first page of search results.
Less than 1% of the public ever goes to page 2. That was done deliberately. So people looking at Google, looking for information, never saw the Republican.
In response to the latest watchdog report, Google strongly denying any wrongdoing, calling the complaints baseless and inaccurate. I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Nearly 78,000 public sector workers are getting their student loans tossed out. The White House says it's forgiving a total of $5.8 billion of debt in this latest initiative. It cancels debt for teachers, social workers, certain nurses and doctors, and government lawyers if they make 10 years of monthly payments. Congratulatory emails to those borrowers will be sent next week. Health alert, 62-year-old Richard Slayman has become the first living person to receive a genetically modified kidney from a pig. Today, Massachusetts General Hospital surgeons announced last weekend's transplant was successful. Slayman's doctors plan to send him home this weekend. Over 100,000 Americans are on transplant waiting lists, according to the United Network for Organ Sharing. Life expectancy in the U.S. rose for the first time in 2 years. According to new numbers from the CDC, people born in the U.S. in 2022 can expect to live 77.5 years. COVID-19 dropped life expectancy in 2020 and 21. In 2021, our life expectancy was just over 76 years old. And in 2020, it was just over 77. But it's still not back to pre-pandemic levels. In fact, in 2019, life expectancy was almost 79 years old. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. We are reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We're taking the pulse of America.
In an instant, Gary Collins and Michelle Kern's lives were in the hands of 3 young robbery suspects.
They grabbed us and then they pushed us over this fence. You can actually still see it's a bit bent, and they pushed us into the dirt.
DC police sent us these images, and you can see them in this surveillance video that Collins shared with us. As Collins and Kearns walk in the background, the 3 young suspects go after them. Collins says at one point you can see one suspect pull what appears to be a gun out of his pocket. Then it was 5 minutes of terror.
I had a gun in the side of my head. She had a gun in her chest, and they immediately said, "Give us everything you have."
The group stole a wallet, phones, and keys, and then took off. They're still on the run.
It really puts it into perspective of how real the crime problem is everywhere, but definitely here in D.C.
The women's NCAA tournament is coming to Portland next week. The owner of Spirit of 77 says he's already gearing up for fans who will be stopping in for a drink before heading over to the Moda Center for the games.
You know, the Blazers haven't been doing too well for us this year. which is it definitely affects business. So it's nice to have something else to bring in some folks during this beautiful sunny time here in Portland.
Donald Kenny says his bar has always gone big for sports games, and this year is no different.
We're going to be home to a bunch of celebrities and former WNBA players.
We look at the economic impact of this at over $3 million, and that's direct economic impact.
This includes the players, NCAA staff, and sports outlets.
Various Ring doorbell cameras captured a house explode in American Fork. You can see pieces of debris falling after the burst brightened the neighborhood.
I woke up this morning and heard the address on the news and jumped in my clothes and drove here.
Tammy Beck's 82-year-old mom, Shirley Hunt, was inside this house.
It's a miracle. My mom's a feisty little thing, so I'm not surprised that she survived, but she has no clue how she made it out.
She says her mom was sleeping.
She woke up and she was hot, so she crawled out and she's like, why am I on the roof?
The explosion was so loud.
I couldn't tell if it was right outside my front door or if it was in my basement.
If there's any positive out of this, it's miraculous that anyone survived this event.
Hundreds of families are coping with the reality of a child who's been exposed to lead in the food their families trusted. It's revealed a stunning gap in our food safety system that Spotlight on America has been investigating for years. The foods we give to our little ones aren't required to be tested for toxic heavy metals like lead and arsenic. Now, as national correspondent Lisa Fletcher reports, some states are moving ahead where the federal government has failed to protect babies.
Hi. Hello, sweetie. Rudy is the best boy. He is the sweetest little boy. He loves to play. He loves blocks and building.
Rudy Callahan is a happy, active toddler, says his mom, Sarah.
Yay, you did it!
So when the phone rang after a routine health screening, the news stopped the family in their tracks.
The Maryland Health Department called and said, hey, your son has lead poisoning. We were shocked.
And confused. Home surveys and searches for sources of lead turned up nothing. Even an X-ray of Rudy's stomach left them without answers.
A work colleague told me that the FDA had issued a recall for the Wanabana apple cinnamon fruit puree pouches. My mouth dropped to the floor.
These pouches are now the subject of a massive recall and international investigation. The cinnamon used to flavor the puree was loaded with lead, 2,000 times above recommended safety standards. Nearly 500 people across 44 states have been poisoned, mostly children around Rudy's age.
I was furious. We thought we were giving him the best, but but very obviously we were not.
Despite the known harmful effects to a child's brain and universal agreement among top health agencies that there is no safe level of lead for babies, there is no requirement that baby food makers keep dangerous heavy metals, including lead, out of their products. They're not even required to test for it.
Wanabana is an horrendous case study in something we've been investigating for years, and there are still no enforceable standards. There are no limits set for these toxic ingredients by the FDA. What's your reaction to that?
It just seems like they don't care enough about this vulnerable population of people.
For the Callahans, it's a painful waiting game. Rudy is receiving special care, as his family says he is already exhibiting speech delays. But the true impact of lead on his development may not reveal itself until he grows older.
So unfortunately for us, we live our day-to-day life loving him and being happy with him. But I think inside, we're always waiting for the next shoe to drop.
In the meantime, the Callahans have a champion in the Maryland State House.
I'm here to ask for your favorable report on HB 97, Rudy's Law.
Maryland state lawmaker Denny Taveras introduced Rudy's Law, which would require manufacturers to test final products and make those results available through QR codes right on the label, putting potential contamination in plain view for parents. Legislation to make similar rules the law of the land have failed in Congress, pushing states to take matters into their own hands.
There should be some kind of regulation, especially on food for babies and infants and toddlers.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
Coming up, the news that drove the stock market to close at new record highs today. We're back in 90 seconds. The stock market continues to rally after the Federal Reserve meeting yesterday. The major averages closed at new record highs. The Dow jumping almost 270 points to nearly 40,000. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ also climbing. The Fed kept interest rates unchanged yesterday, along with its prediction of 3 rate cuts this year. And that's going to do it for us for this edition of the National Desk. We invite you to join us again this evening. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tonight.